Hello, everyone. Welcome to Laser Focus. This is the deep dive pop culture podcast from Nerdist. I'm Kyle Anderson. Thank you for listening. This is one of our episodes this week, folks, that is just about nostalgia nerdery, which, we can only talk about in the news type stuff for so long. And then I want to talk about stuff that I liked when I was a kid and still like, in fact. What many people know, and I will get into this with my guest, who shall remain nameless at the moment. But before I got into Doctor Who, I would say my first like big sci-fi fandom was the show that we're going to talk about, which somehow remains relevant in a really weird way, the way a lot of 90s shows did not. So we're going to be talking about the X-Files. Hooray and hurrah. I'm excited to talk about it. Joining me is somebody with whom I have nerded out about both Doctor Who and the X-Files in the past. She is a writer and editor and co-founder of headoverfeels.com.
Yes.
Headoverfeels.com. I was like, .net? I don't know.
No, that's right. You got it.
Please welcome to the show, Sage Young. Hi, Sage. How are you?
Hi, Kyle. I'm great. This is truly my favorite thing to talk about in the entire world. So I'm thrilled.
I figured that was the case, and that's why I was like, we could talk about the X-Files, I'm surprised, honestly, this is episode 87, that I haven't already talked about the X-Files in this episode, so...
just waiting for this one.
It was just waiting,
I appreciate the fact that you waited for me.
Absolutely.
Even if that was not the intention, I'm going to take it that way.
But yeah, before we get into the X-Files, I do want to, you are a purveyor of, geek fandoms, I guess.
Sure.
You celebrate them. We met first through Doctor Who fandoms. And I guess it seems only reasonable that we would have similar fandoms, as we are of similar age and growing up in the same period of time in our lives. But yeah, like, what was your kind of growing up? What were your favorite shows? And then, like, when did you find the X-Files?
Yeah. I was very much just a TV fan as a kid, and I got into, these were the days when you just watched what was on because you didn't really have a choice. So I remember watching some like really terrible one-season sitcoms that I still remember jokes from, and just stuff that comes into your head and you become really obsessed with. But I would say the first two shows I was really obsessed with. One as a preteen. Which, God, I tried to rewatch it. It does not hold up. Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman.
Oh boy, I like that show too. It doesn't hold up.
It doesn't hold up. I will say John Shea, fabulous Lex Luthor.
Sure.
Still one of the greatest Lex Luthors ever, but the rest of it is a little dated and, also things have happened with those people. But I was like deeply, deeply obsessed with that show when I was a child. I remember like leaving family dinners to go sit in my grandmother's bedroom where she had a TV so that I could watch because it was on Sunday nights, if you recall. Opposite Sequest, which was on, I did not watch Sequest. I watched Lois and Clark. And then the other show I was really obsessed with as a preteen and then into teen years was Friends.
Sure.
And remain that way also. But I think I wish I could remember some sort of light bulb moment with the X-Files, but I don't. I think I just remember when it started airing in syndication on FX.
Yeah.
So I started watching it sort of out of order. So I was watching older episodes on FX whenever they were on. And then I think the first season that I watched live was season 5. So going into the movie, because I remember being super excited for Fight the Future and going to see that in the theaters. And so, it was a different time then. You really couldn't just pick up a box set and go at it. Do you remember they had those little, the VHS sets though, or they would, combine things, and I would get those from the video store if I could. And then, our mutual friend, Kim, and I were talking about this the other day, whenever they would there used to be an annual Thanksgiving X-Files marathon.
Absolutely.
On FX, and I would just tape that every year just in case there was an episode on there that I hadn't had yet. So then I had multiple VHSs that had like Clyde Bruckman's Final Repose on it. But those what you had to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a very similar story where, like, I remember I have a very I was going to say a vivid, vague memory, but that doesn't make any sense. But when my family and I think we're on vacation somewhere, we were in a motel room, and it was a Friday night, and my dad was like awake watching an X-Files episode, like when it was on Friday nights. So that was like either season 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Um, and kind of being like, "Oh, this is creepy" or whatever. And then when I was just looking to see if I could figure out when it aired on FX, and it's not immediately apparent, but I think it was probably like around season 4-ish, I
I
want to
think
say, maybe
so.
season
That
4 or
sounds right.
5. But like you, like, they showed an episode every night for,
Mhm.
on the
Yeah.
weekdays. And they were going vaguely in order sometimes, and then sometimes not, and they would just kind of skip around. But that was like the magic of syndication back then. Like, you know, they would show the same 100 episodes over and over and over again. But yeah, I remember those those Thanksgiving marathons where like people voted on their favorite episodes, and
Yeah.
um I still remember that Bad Blood was voted the best episode ever, that whatever year that was, which was an episode, or season 5 episode. But then they showed Home last because it was so,
Oh, they had to
like,
show it late. Yeah.
they had to show it late. Um, which is still, I'm surprised they got it on television. Like, it's all
Likewise.
about inbreeding and cannibalism and stuff,
Yeah.
which is pretty messed up. But yeah, so man, just thinking about it, and like it was such a huge part of my like preteen into teenagehood. And I remember going to see the movie Fight the Future, and then like, because at that time, it's actually pretty similar to Doctor Who in a weird way, where like I got into both shows just as they were about to hit their absolute peak in America, at least.
Mhm.
um and and feeling like, oh my God, everybody watches my favorite show. And then like very quickly being like, oh, now nobody really watches it anymore.
Nobody
Although,
at my school watched it.
oh, really?
I felt super dorky. Like people were just like, what is the show that you watch on Friday nights when we're all at the football dance? Like, don't worry about that. Mind your own
Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
But it was definitely the height of popularity. And I had a few friends who we were just like crazed. And it was harder to be crazed in those days because there
Mhm.
wasn't that much information available to you. But it was, I guess it was, my dad was always kind of like an early tech adopter. And I remember that we had the internet a little bit before a lot of my friends did because he was super excited about it. So that was my first, that was my first internet fandom. That was the first fan fiction I ever read. That was the first, episode guides that I would go to
Mm.
and read through and check and get those books from Barnes and Noble that were like the official guide, the unofficial guide. Got to get the updated one that has season 6 in it. And yeah, it was kind of a full-time job. I convinced my parents to let me subscribe to the X-Files fan club. So I would
Oh,
get the
wow.
magazine, and then
Sure.
you would get some like fun stuff that came with it, which I recently found out from reading her book, Burn It Down, that Maureen Ryan was the editor in chief of the X-Files magazine for a while, which
I
is
read that book and I don't
awesome.
remember clocking that, but
Maybe it was in something else that she wrote, but I
hmm.
remember reading that recently, and that was one of her sort of first editorial jobs. And I was like, oh, that makes sense because I've
Yeah.
always enjoyed her writing, and yeah, it turned out I was reading it when I was like, 14, 15.
By the way, amazing book. I would highly recommend everybody who is interested in Hollywood read Burn It Down. It's
Yes,
very good
it's
and
very
shocking, but
good
also
and
very good.
upsetting.
Yeah.
Yes,
Um,
but worth it.
yeah. Okay, so what are sort of like your early kind of brain sparky moments with that show? Like, do you remember what drew you in initially? What kind of around what season like you would have been watching that would have kind of made you a fan?
Yeah, I think that when I started in syndication, I did start early. I think I was such a TV addict that I saw, in the TV guide that they were going to be starting this show from the
Oh yeah.
beginning. And I can't honestly remember if I watched the pilot first or not, but I do remember that that was the reason why I was like, oh, I might as well pick this up because I have the chance to now. I can just pick it
Hmm.
up. And I think it was, oh God, there's so much about it. I mean, obviously, like David and Gillian are like immediately magnetic and incredible. Um, to this day, you're saying like it's still relevant. Like they just presented the SAG Awards the other day, and there were
Yeah.
all kinds of rumors about another revival. So it stays relevant, and they stay baiting people, and I love them for that. But yeah, I think it was kind of also the first. I don't know. I guess you could call Lois and Clark a sci-fi show, but it felt a little more classic comic booky,
Sure.
which I than the sci-fi that I got into later. So I think there was something about the darkness of it that I liked a lot too. I also love a procedural, and I think
Mm,
that was kind of the first procedural I started to watch. But I think it was really the fandom aspect of it and all the ways. And this is what is, appealing to me about Doctor Who also. Once you realize there's this whole world of stuff to get into and go to and read and listen to and talk to people about. It just kind of encourages that interest more and more. So just the fact that when I was getting into the X Files, I was also on the internet for the first time,
right.
looking at fan pages, looking at people's like GeoCities pages, and I was using Usenet with my dad's like professional email address and like writing very silly comments about episodes. That was all happening at the same time. So if that show had come about pre-internet for me, I don't know that how that would have been different, but it definitely played a huge part. What about you?
Yeah. I think, well, I was just kind of like musing on the fact that, like, if you're absolutely right, if this had come out a few years before, I don't think it would have landed nearly as much. I mean, because it was kind of on the fence, you know.
Hmm.
Um, I think it was like on the verge of getting canceled, maybe like the first year, like that was.
Yeah.
Um, but I like one of the things that first kind of stood out to me was, and especially on rewatch recently, is how gloomy the first few seasons looked, and I didn't
Hmm.
realize at the time that that was because it was shot in Canada, which is a
Right.
very like in a particularly gloomy time of year in Vancouver and stuff. And because the later seasons that were shot in LA definitely do not have that same kind of vibe to it.
No.
Um, and I didn't like. I think that was right around because there was a period of time, kids. Let me sit you down and tell you about anybody younger listening to this. Like there was things were scary back then and no one was mad about it. Like it wasn't like kids shouldn't be
No.
watching this. It was like,
Right.
let's make scary stuff for kids specifically. Like Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark are actually pretty scary shows, which
Hmm.
we've talked about on the show before. Um and so there was an aspect of the edginess. I think what you were kind of getting at was like more like Lois and Clark felt like a safe kind of show.
Sure.
And kind of a sillier show, even though it was cool. I loved that show too when I was a kid, but um, there was an aspect of like, ooh, there is scary stuff on the show, and like, but these are really smart and kind of like savvy people, kind of going against it, and also just there was big 90s were huge alien invasion, alien abduction, kind of like they even make fun of it on on the X-Files. Alien
Right.
abduction, Fact or Fiction was big on Fox like the year before they made fun of it. So I think it was all of that stuff, like UFO stuff. I started getting kind of like interested in. I'm not now. I don't care. Like, stop. I don't care about like, I would love it if any president was just like, 100% they're aliens. It's like, great, good for you.
Yeah.
I'm tired of them being like, we're going to declassify 2 parts of this, but not the like, shut up, just get out of here.
To what end?
Um, but like following on the ongoing mythology of it was such a huge, like, at least for the first few seasons, I guess probably the first 5 until the movie, maybe season 6 a little bit. Anybody who's watched all the show knows that eventually it became like, all right, just get to the Monster of the Week episodes, because that's all anybody really cared about after a while.
Yeah.
Um,
The
we also should,
mythology starts to get a little messy, for
yeah,
sure.
and also I think that it's a problem with a lot of things is like success kind of ruins it because
Mm.
I think the initial idea from Chris Carter, the creator, who never created anything as good again, which is a bummer. He tried
He
several
tried.
times. Um, is that after the movie, there were basically 5 seasons in a movie and then we're done. And they didn't do that because the show was so popular at that point that they couldn't do it and they
Right.
had to keep going. And I think and obviously you and I both really like season 8. I think season 8 is
I love
better than a
season
lot of
8.
people give it credit for. But some of the magic was gone,
Yeah.
at a certain point. I also want to, before we get into, we're going to go and kind of talk about our favorite episodes and stuff, but we also need to point out that this was such a cultural phenomenon that the term shipping exists because of the X-Files.
100%.
People online who wanted Mulder and Scully to get together really early on called themselves shippers because they were about the relationship. So, folks, if you ship anything, it's because of the X-Files. And maybe you didn't know that.
I'm also a real stickler about, the way we used to talk on the internet versus the way we talk now, because I even saw somebody, it might have been the actual SAG Awards, had posted a photo of David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson from the other night. And they were like, Sculder fans, where are you at? And I was like, no one ever. We were not doing portmanteaus back then. We were not doing portmanteaus. You were either MSR, Mulder Scully romance, or you were no Romo and you didn't want them to kiss ever. Those were the two terms. There was not a portmanteau. That was not a thing.
What was the first portmanteau?
Oh. Now I can't think of any that are good.
I know, but I'm trying to think like what was the first one that people, because
like
Bennifer might have been it.
Bennifer might have been it. Which makes more sense because their names are similar and like lead into each other.
Yeah,
Sculder
Ben
is
and Jen,
like,
stuff like that. Yeah.
I hate it.
Sculder is bad though.
It's bad.
I don't like that at all.
There's nothing sexy about that at all.
No. Not even a little bit.
No.
But goddamn, both of them still look good and
They
somehow
look
are
amazing.
better looking. Like it's crazy.
It's crazy to me. Yeah, they're super attractive. I got to interview them I got to do the roundtables for one of the seasons of the revival, and I remember I got there kind of late-ish, or I just like right before it started, and Kyle knows about this, and if those of you who have not done roundtables at a convention or something, when you sit around a table and there's one chair that's sort of leaning up against the table, and that's where whoever you're interviewing is going to go. And so by the time I got there, the only seat that was left at the only table was right next to the seat that was against the table. So I was like, oh great, now I just have to sit 6 inches away from these two people and listen to them talk and answer my questions. And it really was very surreal. They're both gorgeous.
Yeah, that is something that you kind of never get over, is that like you like not speaking to people, because speaking to people is one thing, but just like being within molecules of famous
really
people
strange.
is a weird feeling.
Yeah. Especially people who they raised me.
Yeah, very much so. I've never gotten to meet either of them, and I'm sort of like, one day. What convention or whatever was that?
That was New York Comic Con.
New York Comic Con, of course.
Yeah. And I think it was for the second season of the revival, because I do remember Gillian at that roundtable being like, I'm done. Thanks, everybody. I'm not going to do this anymore. Everyone was like, okay.
Which, good for them. We'll talk about the revival.
Yeah, we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a fun experience.
So so during the pandemic, I did a rewatch with my wife who had never seen it. So that was really fun to be like, first of all, she loved it too. And I'm like, okay, that's good. Stands up. It's not just me because she does not like Doctor Who, which is not something I care about really, but she did try. And I think that's really all anybody can do. But she was really into the X-Files. And we watched it so fast, like basically like an episode or two every night until we were done. And that was pandemic for you. That's that's the kind of stuff you did. But it kind of reinforced what was my initial belief, watching the initial, when I was a kid, is that seasons 3, 4, and 5, that's the money right there. Like that is really where all like every episode is a hit. It felt like anyway. And that's not true, because there's the one with the cats, which is not a good episode. But but yeah. So anyway, so let's start kind of at the beginning. I think season 1 has a good mix of episodes. I do think there are some that are less refined than what the show would be.
Certainly.
It also kind of, I have a hard time remembering what some of them are. Shadows and Shapes One is
Oh,
called Shadows, one is called Shapes. I can never remember which one is which because one is about werewolves and one of them is about the moon, I think.
yeah, I think, Shadows is the moon one, where they're like, "Moon's
The
haunted," and then but
yes.
then they can't show anything that's actually happening in space, so it's, like, the most boring episode of television
Yeah.
ever to be made about space. I hope that or no, that was actually space.
Oh, that one's called Space. Well, what is
Yeah, that
Shadows
one's
then?
called space. Wait, Shadows.
See, this is the problem.
Yeah, I know,
Very
right? They're too
boring titles.
familiar. Oh, this is the somebody, killed by telekinesis, the woman, her, like, boss,
Oh,
that
right.
one. Yeah, 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 sorry. And I think is
That's the one with the shadows
I
on the
think
moon.
that's my least
See, but that's the
favorite.
problem. It's about shadows on the moon, and yet that
Right,
one's called Space.
I know. Yeah, and
Whatever.
Shapes is the werewolf one, which has Deputy Hawk from Twin Peaks, and I'm
Yes.
rewatching Twin Peaks now, and the amount of people who have shown up on both of those shows because they were
Yeah.
shot in, like, the same place at a little not quite the same time, but close by. Lots of crossover.
Yeah. Um
There
I
are some bangers, though. I
There are some
mean,
bangers, yeah. Like the pilot is good. I do think that like especially if you rewatch the season or series a bunch, like Scully is not quite Scully in that episode. Um
right.
but then the very next episode, Deep Throat, she's like that's Scully for, going forward. So but I do think it's a good pilot and they bring it back a lot.
Mhm.
Like especially later in the run, it's like
Yeah,
the pilot
Requiem is
sure
like,
seems to be important.
this is the pilot.
Yeah.
There are just such standout interchanges in that pilot that, like,
Mm,
make me give me goosebumps every time, like, just at the end of the episode when they're, questioning Scully about this case and what does Mulder really believe, and she just says, "Agent Mulder believes we're not alone," and then leaves. It's just there's just these and their first interaction, obviously, in the office is like, nobody down here but the FBI's most unwanted, which they also bring back at a certain point, and they're
yeah.
still getting there. Mulder does feel very Mulder. I think he's there from the beginning.
Yeah.
Um,
He's not quite as dry, but all
Not
everything
as
else.
dry,
Yeah.
but a little. And the scene where they're in the, which has I think maybe one of the most famous bloopers of the show when Gillian is trying to get out that monologue about the rain and the mud and the rain.
Uh-huh.
If you've ever seen it, guys, look up pilot Gillian Anderson blooper. It's really, really funny. It's just pouring down rain on them, and she's trying to get out this crazy, repetitive, multi-sentence line. And David Duchovny's just standing there going like this, like you can do it, you can do it. But there's such a joy in that episode, and this like you can sort of see why you can sort of see why she signs up for this. Like I think the scene
Mm,
where he jumps out of the car and is like, "We lost 9 minutes." That whole part. Um, there's such a wonder about Mulder, about just life and about things that he's seeing, and I think that is appealing to her in a way where she, even though she thinks all of this is nonsense, it's appealing to be around someone who has that sort of an attitude towards the world.
yeah.
Especially if you like literally investigating things as your job. So obviously you're interested in this. But yeah, I think the pilot has a great basis for their relationship, and you can sort of see why she would even go along with this in the first place.
Yeah. And that's a big kind of theme in the maybe first half of the first season is like why would she want to do this? You know what I
Right.
mean? And like, there's the one episode with Donal Logan where uh he's he thinks Mulder's a crackpot and is just like,
Yeah.
what's the point? You're a medical doctor. Like, why would you sign off on all this stuff? And you do buy that, like, Scully believes, and I think rightfully so, that Mulder needs that kind of pull back to earth. And
Mm.
she's okay with like, um, at least stretching what she initially believes. But like, that's one of my favorite things about Scully is how religious, not that she's like, a zealot or anything like that, but she was raised in the church, and so she has a really strong faith in that
Mhm.
spirituality, which Mulder does not. And the fact that the two of them kind of don't see eye to eye on stuff like aliens, but like you know, um, she's a skeptic otherwise. Beyond the Sea is like was the episode that really where that comes to the fore.
Yeah.
Um, which is one of the early best episodes, I think.
Absolutely.
Where they have to go and a convicted murderer who is about to be executed says that he is a conduit basically for psychic activity, and they have to kind of prove the veracity of it so that he can tell the FBI and just people in general where various murder victims are. So he basically just doesn't want to get electrocuted, or and who wouldn't really?
Who wouldn't?
Um,
And who would you
but
get to do this but Brad Dourif?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, Brad Dourif is so good in it. If you've ever seen Exorcist 3, he basically is doing the same thing, but it's still
That
good.
has been a journey of mine from watching X-Files very young and then getting into more and more film history as I get older. The more that I see things that I'm like, oh, that's where that came from.
Yeah,
I mean, when you Ice is, I think, another great episode from season 1 that is super
absolutely.
tense, and that is obviously the thing. So
Yeah,
it's and I mean the entire first sequence with Scully in the pilot is Silence of the Lambs. So
right.
there's a lot going on. I also have noticed in my most recent rewatch, more actors that I've seen in kind of classic horror stuff will show up
Mm.
in small roles, and yeah, there's just it's like I'm doing that backwards now at this point, like realizing where some of these influences came from, even though I know the X-Files episode much better than some of the films.
That's one of my favorite things about it. I do think that this show gave me a intro to a lot of like darker sci-fi and certainly a lot of horror things that I wouldn't have known otherwise. And just like you, like that's buried in my brain. And so when I watch a movie from
Yeah.
the 60s and I go, oh, I see what they did, or something
Yeah.
like that, like you almost go, God damn it, the X-Files. But
Yeah.
you're also kind of like, I would probably have done the same thing
Respect.
because
Yeah.
that's what you grew up with.
And I
So my,
wouldn't have watched a scary movie when I was that
right.
age.
Yeah.
Like I was not I am a scary movie person now, but I was such a fraidy cat of everything. I didn't want to watch scary movies at sleepovers, but I would sit and watch a season of the X-Files. So that was kind of my training wheels into a lot of genre stuff.
Yeah, same. And I think the commercial breaks were the thing for me. Like
Yeah.
when I first started watching horror movies, because I similarly was a fraidy cat. I was very scared of everything. I would watch horror movies on basic cable so that there would be commercial breaks, and
You just be
obviously
reminded of reality.
and they would cut out the real gory stuff. But that's like, that was sort of what was this is off topic sort of, but like what was when you were finally like, all right, I'm gonna actually start watching horror movies. Do you remember like, here we go? Like, do you remember how that started?
It was the It miniseries at a sleepover, which continues to be one of my very favorite pieces of media in existence.
Sure.
So, yeah, started strong, and then we were big on It, big on Candyman.
Sure.
That was a big one, and then I guess I kind of got more into it when like the Scream franchise started. It became a little bit more current and cool to go see stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think that was probably my
we
first
sort
one.
of came like the slasher movement, the initial slasher movement really just kind of ended by time we were old enough to care about it. And so, yeah, Scream was probably, I mean, it kicked off that whole kind of late 90s, early 2000s, like teen horror boom or whatever. And then because of that, like my similar thing was watching all the Halloween movies on Halloween.
Nice.
On AMC, I think showed all of them or something like that.
Yeah, I remember that.
So I was definitely into that stuff. One Halloween when I was in college, I think it was my sophomore year of college, I was didn't have anywhere to go because I was a dork. And I went to Blockbuster, a thing that no longer exists, and I rented 3 movies I had never seen before: Evil Dead 2, Reservoir Dogs, and Swingers. And I watched all 3 of them that night in that order because I was like, I want the last one I watched to be the least scary because I was so afraid of everything. And I was like, oh, this isn't scary. It's great. And so that was sort of my like, I'd opened the door to like legitimately, horror things and not just
what a
stuff on TV.
What a night of Film education.
Well, similar to the thing that you had said about like noticing stuff in the X-Files afterwards, since I watched them in that order, I watched Reservoir Dogs, and there is a Reservoir Dogs reference in Swingers,
In
and
Swingers, right, when they're
I was like, this is so cool. Like,
it's all coming together.
I get it. But yeah, so anyway, back to the X-Files. As per yeah, I think you're right, actually. I think there are really good episodes in season 1. I had sort of forgot, but there are some ones that, like, again, I just don't remember. Conduit, I think, is kind of bleh. I like the Jersey Devil is a whatever episode. I think Genderbender does not age well at all. And there are a few of those.
Genderbender is really okay. 2 things I want to mention. One, Jersey Devil stands out the most to me because it's become a meme where Mulder's like, "I've seen it," and they're like, "Seen what?" And he holds up that picture of it's just a Jersey Devil with like boobs, like it's a female Jersey Devil, but it's the funniest, most like rudimentary sketch, and his face is so serious that it's just really funny that he does that. And Genderbender was actually not. I think when I rewatched it, I was really gritting my teeth, and it wasn't as bad as I remembered.
Oh, that's good.
I did notice that there's one part in I think the first case that they're looking into, and they're talking about, you know, what happened to this. I can't remember if the victim was a man or a woman in the first one, but like they had brought somebody home from a club, and Scully says something like, "It's hard to imagine bringing home a stranger at this day and age." And I remember I was kind of Googling around or like looking on Twitter and seeing what people were talking about the X-Files of new fans. And I realized that people don't know what that meant in 1993. Like I saw a tweet that was basically like, "Oh, I can't believe Scully was slut shaming this person." And I'm like, it's AIDS. It's AIDS. Like it's 1993. There is she's not doing that. There is like a legitimate safety concern that she's referencing that people don't know what the context of that was. And they never mention it in the episode, but clearly. Anyway.
Well, yeah, in this day and age means a very particular thing to a very particular subset of people. That's a good point. Yeah, I think this one has some really great standout mythology episodes. So you have Deep Throat, which is the introduction basically of the entire the main thrust of everything. Fallen Angel about the crashed ship is a really fun episode. EBE, I think, is a absolute standout.
Yeah, EBE is great. That was the one I picked as my favorite mythology episode of that season for the blog, and it's your Lone Gunman intro. So
that's right. Yeah, it is this one.
Yeah. For that alone.
Yeah, and then the Erlenmeyer flask is I think the tapes that I had would re-reference the 3 VHS tapes in a box set, 2 episodes each. Definitely had EBE and Erlenmeyer flask.
They
and
definitely had those 2 together for sure.
And then Squeeze and Tombs.
Squeeze and Tombs were together.
And then there were 2 other ones, and I don't remember what those ones were.
And
maybe
that was
Fallen Angels and Deep Throat. I don't remember.
That sounds right. I think it's interesting that even in the first season, you have the reappearance of a monster of the week.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would maybe expect that in another show to come much later, but you have Squeeze and Tombs in the same season, and are both excellent episodes.
Absolutely.
And have a different enough take on that villain to make it worthwhile. And they bring threats come back with kind of diminishing returns in the future, but Squeeze and Tombs is a good first one.
Also, don't look up any information about the guy who plays Eugene Victor Toombs.
Don't. If you're
just
like, wow, how did he play that guy so creepy? You don't want to know. Don't want to know.
Yeah. Yeah, those, and Darkness Falls was another really, really good episode. That's the one about
Darkness Falls is a fun one.
Like flesh-eating bacteria.
Yeah.
The bugs that are only active at night, or in the dark, I guess I should say. And they're stuck in the woods, and their generators running out of it's great.
It's really good.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there are any other ones. I mean, we're only on season 1. We got to move, but but I do think even as early as season 2, like stuff starts really happening. Like, at the end of that season, the X-Files is broken up, basically. Scully
Yeah.
is put somewhere else. Um, Not for very long. And also it just sort of coincided with Gillian getting pregnant and having a baby. So like there's a whole thing where she gets, which I don't think would have happened had she not actually in real life
I
needed
don't
to
think
be
so.
gone for several episodes,
Yeah.
where she gets abducted. But the first like 6 episodes are incredible. I think in season
Yeah.
2, Little Green Men is a really weird episode. The Host is a now classic episode about the fluke man
Mhm.
who lives in the toilets.
And it's played by a future writer on the show, Darren Morgan.
That's right. Who
One of the greatest.
True. And Blood was in the very next episode, which he wrote the story for, and his brother his brother Glenn and co-writer James Wong wrote the script. Blood is a very scary episode.
Blood is very scary.
It's about William Sanderson seeing messages in digital readouts telling him to kill people and stuff.
Yeah.
And it maybe is actually like a person doing it. Like, oh man, that's a great episode. I really love that one. And then Sleepless, that's when you get Alex Krycek, who is the show's like constant son of a bitch who just keeps showing up.
Has no loyalty to anybody.
No, seriously.
Is just kind of like your mercenary character. He's great.
Yeah.
And then you're into the first big kind of arc.
Yeah.
Mythology
Dwayne
arc in the
Barry,
show.
as played by what is his name? Steve Railsback.
Excellent.
I used to quote, my dad and I used to quote him to each other from this, because he always calls himself,
Which part?
he speaks in the third person.
Yeah.
So we would always just go, please, for your own sake, don't stop Dwayne Barry.
Don't stop Dwayne Barry. That's fantastic.
Yeah. But that
also a genuinely scary episode. I feel like there was a lot of I don't know, I think there was a lot of early 90s fear of, and this is not to be like super dark or whatever, but this was sort of before the era that we live in now of mass shootings being extremely common.
Right.
But in the early 90s there was this sort of like going postal fear, and that people would just freak out, and there's a lot of episodes that are about people taking hostages. Who seem to be normal or seem to be okay, and then something just like sets them off. That was just something I noticed it feels very of the time.
Oh, totally. I mean, because you can find similar, Blood, the aforementioned Blood has similar themes too, where he's just a guy working at a place and he's starting to like lose his mind a little bit.
And then, oh God, Folly Ado, much later, but Folly Ado also. Yeah.
Yeah. That's another good episode. Oh man, they're all good. So in the first stretch of episodes, because Scully gets abducted, the next episode, Ascension, is basically about her going from the back of Dwayne Barry's car to the alien ship, and then she's gone for an episode, and then she comes back in one breath in a coma. Episode 3, oh no, it's called 3. The episode title is the number 3, is roundly considered one of the worst episodes.
Yeah, absolutely one of the worst things I've ever seen in my life. I don't know why. It's boring.
It's
and
very
about
boring.
Like sexy vampires, but I don't think that they pulled that off really. There's some good moments. I love the image of Moulder like in his shirt sleeves, like wearing Scully's cross and like sitting in a field and holding on to it. Like, yes, that I love.
Yeah.
But the rest of that episode is it's not even just campy in a fun way. It's really just a drag.
Yeah. And the lead guest actress in that, Perry Reeves, was dating David Duchovny at the time, which I think is why she was in it. But that should have been a much better
for some other
episode.
people on the show too.
Vampires. They would do vampires much better later on, but
yes, much better.
I'm trying to think. Red Museum is one I often forget is about the mythology, but that's
it's kind of like a secret mythology episode.
Yeah.
I really like that one a lot. That was one where on rewatch I was like, oh, I don't really think I ever gave this episode its full due. But Red Museum's a lot of fun, and I did forget that it was a mythology episode, because it's usually you can really tell it's one or the other from the very beginning, and not in that case.
Yeah. Oh, I lost my place. Oh wait, is Irresistible the one?
Irresistible.
Yeah. That's the one where they tried to bring that guy back, Donnie Faster.
They did, yeah. And We can talk about that later if we want
Yeah.
to, but it's just to take, because Donnie Pfaster is sort of the show's first great human villain,
Mm.
and then they bring him back and make him inhuman, which I think takes away a lot of the not the appeal, but it takes away a lot of the edge of that character and why that character is interesting.
Yeah.
Because it's supposed to be about like human evil.
Yeah.
And then they're like,
And
oh,
like
maybe it's the
Scully gets
devil.
abducted and she sees him as a demon because he
Yeah.
is so human evil. And I think the initial idea was that he was supposed to be a necrophile, which they
Yes.
did not allow to be kept in there. So then he was just a death fetishist, which is nothing.
Not a thing. There's so much imagery though in that episode that they use where like you get the point, you understand.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a lot of Sleeping Beauty mentions. You get it. Yeah, and I remember watching that, rewatching it. I mean, I've always loved Irresistible. Irresistible is really great, but I really like. There are certain episodes where Mulder and Scully are just like on a totally different track from each other, where they're just responding to something much differently, and not just in what they think happened, but just the way that they're taking in the case. And sometimes they're on the same page, and sometimes they're not. And Irresistible, they make it very clear that Scully is much more afraid of the existence of a man like this than Mulder is. Mulder's kind of like, oh, that's the case for this week. And
he's an FBI profiler. He's used to people like that. Yeah.
But there is something scarier to her about the fact that this man just hates women that much. And I remember reading an interview that Chris Carter did about that episode later, because I thought, oh wow, what a great, it's so rare to see that kind of attention to Scully's character and to take that, that sort of fear of extreme sexism and and then they were like, well, it was just her PTSD from being abducted was what we were writing there. I was like, well, first of all, that doesn't come out at all, and secondly, I'm just going to forget that you said that, because I think the other interpretation is much makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, stop 1995ing this, Chris.
Yeah, Chris, come on. It's a great episode though.
It's really good,
very genuinely scary.
Yeah. That they had a really good roster of writers, but they also had a really good roster of directors, and that one was directed by David Nutter, who I think is maybe top 2 or 3 directors on the show. Maybe him and Rob Bowman, who did the movies. But I
love Rob.
I will say that the 2 episodes that I have watched from season 2 the most, hands down, are Colony and Endgame, which is a 2-parter, which introduces the it plays big into Mulder's sister's abduction and like she's back, but is she actually, and all this stuff. And then it's about alien clones, and there's an alien bounty hunter. I was all about it. And I had these on tape that I taped off of FX, and I just absolutely watched these like crazy. I wish I still had them. I wish I still had those tapes so I could at least see the commercials.
Yeah,
that's the bit that I think would be more fun. But what are your thoughts on my 2 favorite episodes? I'm just kidding.
Talk to me about this. I I was just looking through my notes from our season 2 episode that we did, or blog that we did, and I wanted to mention this about Red Museum. Red Museum was originally supposed to be a Picket Fences crossover. But it was, but it was supposed to be, but that was like cross network, so they wouldn't allow it.
Right.
But that was something that I think I've learned for the first time on this last rewatch. So that was new information to me.
Yeah, I definitely
always
did not know
new.
that.
Yeah, Colony Endgame. Gosh, is that? I don't even. Do I have thoughts about Colony?
Maybe you don't. Maybe that was just me watching that as a kid. But I love the alien bounty hunter who shows up quite a few times.
Oh yeah,
and I love the fact that he had the little device that
little stiletto thing. Yeah, so scary.
Get in the back of the neck, which would kill a clone. Which really anything would kill a clone, but that was the only way to like.
And also that would probably kill a person too.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting stabbed in the back of the neck with a 4-inch blade. I'm sure that would do it.
We get some great. We got Humbug.
Humbug is really good. That's another. Darren Morgan. Darren Morgan is roundly considered the best writer on the show. He did not write all that many episodes in total, but they are all really interesting and fun.
Darren
and good.
and I would say we started calling him in our on Head Over Fields when we were doing our rewatch. We would do a season recap every when we were done with each season, and we just started calling him GHVG, which was God Himself and Gilligan. So God Himself and Gilligan is our like
Sure.
he's up there, and Darren Morgan. But Darren Morgan was the one I think who really discovered the humor in the X-Files, and the humor as he found it was that he just thought like Moulder was like insufferable.
Yeah, was a
So
doofus.
he wrote a bunch of episodes just making fun of him and making David Duchovny do it, and he is so dryly funny that it was just it's perfect. There's that great scene in Humbug where the freak show guy is like, what do you want to go through the rest of life looking like that? And he like gestures to Moulder. Mulder's just like doing kind of like a hero pose in the background. And you're like, oh, this guy is an idiot.
Yeah.
Like in some other context, you'd be like, ooh, he's like handsome and heroic. And in that context, you're like, oh my God, like give it a rest.
Yeah. It's also definitely funny watching this now because like obviously at the time and still now as a person, but like Mulder is like very handsome, but like the clothing choice in the 90s was just like the biggest suits in the world. So it's just like not flattering by today's standards at all.
No. Yeah, and Scully gets like less matronly as she gets older because they really have her in some rough suits in the beginning, and then she gets like very sleek later on. Like her suit in Fight the Future, amazing.
Oh heavens, yes.
Yeah, so good. But there's some good. I think the other thing I didn't mention about season 1 into season 2 is that you really don't realize, or I forgot how little Skinner you get in season 1.
Yeah, he doesn't even show up until like right by the end, I think.
Yeah.
He's in Tombs as his first episode, actually.
Right. And you don't even know that this guy is going to be that important. And season 2 really brings him into the mythology in a bigger way. Yeah. Oh, I also was deeply, probably the episode that scared me the most as a child, and I wasn't scared of a lot of X-Files stuff, but I was terrified of the episode about the satanic teachers.
Oh yeah, which is a German title, and I can't say it.
I don't want to pronounce it because I'm sure I will do it wrong. But I was deeply terrified of that woman, and that actress whose name I can't remember is such a popular character actress and shows up in everything. And this poor lady,
Susan
every
Blomart
time
is her name,
and every time I see her, I'm like, she's just scary to me. I'm very sorry to her. I'm sure she's a very nice woman, and she works a ton. She's super talented. But that scene where she's just in the other room, kind of like communing with the devil, and then makes the snake eat Bull from Frasier. Scary stuff.
That was actually on Wikipedia. The image is her with the snake eyes and the candle flame. That is a really scary episode. I remember watching that one a lot. For some reason, I feel like FX showed that one a lot.
Yeah. It had a good ending too, because remember, she just kind of disappears and they're in the classroom and it just says, it was nice working with you or something like that, like written on the chalkboard. It's great. Classic stuff.
Yeah. I also like, because that kind of leads, not every one of these threats can be stopped or killed or whatever. Like, I like the idea
they barely solve any cases.
Absolutely. They know what's going on, but they can never prove anything because something happens or whatever. The evidence turns into a bird and flies away or whatever,
They write like 2 wildly different reports and Skinner's like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this. And they just file it and that's the end of it.
I will say, I just remembered this. One of the reasons I love Colony and Endgame is because it has the Skinner versus Mr. X fight, which is where he beats the shit out of Mr. X to try to get information because Mulder is going to die or whatever.
Yeah. I read on the Wikipedia that you were now reminding me because I couldn't remember what episode that was, that they actually like broke the elevator set. They were going so hard at it. Like,
I love it. That I'm a huge Skinner fan, and that was like that was the beginning of that, where it's like, okay, he actually is their ally. Like he's not compromised as much as we thought he was, or whatever.
No. And then of course you get at the end of the season, beginning of season 3, you really get Skinner stepping up for them.
For sure. Yeah.
But there are some really good guest stars in season 2 also, because you have the Tony Shalhoub.
Yep. In the first Vince Gilligan episode.
In the first Vince Gilligan episode, which is like not the best Vince Gilligan episode, but it's
interesting.
It's interesting. There's a young Bradley Whitford in Firewalker.
Right. Which is not as good as Ice, but it's still pretty
Not as
good.
good as Ice, but they were trying to get there. Oh, I also love Dode Calm or Dod Calm, however you say it.
Oh
When
yeah.
they are like aging on the boat
Oh yeah, that's
and they have that crazy old age makeup on. That's a fun one.
a good one. Yeah, we're just sort of like looking through, but trying to remember like what everything is. Cause again, like not always do I remember what the titles mean or like have to
Yeah.
do with. Um but I do love it anytime that like they reference poetry or whatever, because like Fearful Symmetry is one
Mm.
that just stands out to me because that is a reference to the poem The Tiger by William Blake.
Yes.
Um
That's the
where
one with all the elephant and the
yeah,
zoo animals and stuff.
that's the elephant
It's
one.
not great,
It's
but
not a good episode.
it's a great title.
Yeah.
Oh, and Dean Norris is in that one about the flesh eating, like when
Oh
people
yeah,
have those pustules that are like exploding. That one's really gross.
I forget what that one was called.
That's F. emasculata.
Oh yes. Oh yeah, because that's the name of the disease or whatever.
Yeah, very young Dean Norris. There's a lot of future Breaking Bad, Better Call
Oh,
Saul
for sure.
people
Yeah.
that you will see if you ever go through this whole
Well, especially
process
as
we
as
did.
the seasons go on and Vince Gilligan becomes more and more, active, like
Yeah.
you see even, writers and directors and like, assistant producers like will become big Breaking Bad people.
I think Michelle McLaren's first episode
Yeah.
she ever directed of anything was an X-Files episode.
Yeah,
So
I think you are correct. Yeah, season 3 I love. That's the one I think I've seen the most overall. I did have a lot of these taped. You get 2. Oh no, 3. 3? I think you get 3 Darren Morgan episodes in this season, because you get Clyde Bruckman's Final Repose, which that's got
classic.
Emmy-winning Peter Boyle performance.
Yep.
Which I almost don't even want to tell. Like, if you haven't seen this one, just go watch it
Just go
instantly. Like, it is absolutely one of the best ever. Then he also wrote War of the Copperphages, which is literally about people thinking that there's an infestation or like an evil alien invasion of cockroaches,
Alien
and it ends up
cockroaches.
not being. And then the last one, of course, is the immortal Jose Chung's From Outer Space, co-starring what the hell is his name? Can't remember. Charles Nelson Riley.
Yeah, Charles Nelson Riley, yeah.
Um,
and Alex Trebek.
Oh yeah, and Alex Trebek
And Alex
Jesse Ventura
Right.
and
Jesse Ventura. God.
and I think all 3 of those have, or at least 2 of them have, the amazing Yappy,
Yeah.
which is just this weird guy they found. I don't think he's been in anything else.
No, wasn't he a stand-in?
Yeah.
I think he might have been one of David
Yeah.
stand-ins, yeah. But also season 3 starts so strong because that leading in Anasazi is such a great cliffhanger at the end of season 2, and then into 2 amazing like Blessing Way Paperclip. Not all of the trilogies work super well, but sometimes these 3 episode runs are just epic, and I really felt like that was the case here. Everything that happens in Mulder's dead, essentially. He's back to life. This is when Skinner tells the cigarette smoking man there's no smoking in his office, and tells him to kiss his ass, and there's just lots of good stuff happens.
Yeah.
Scully shoots Moulder. That's a fun one. Krychek kills his dad,
Yeah, these are incredibly important episodes. I had The Blessing Way and Paperclip on tape, but I did not have Anasazi, so I was always like, I guess I'll just be fine with not really knowing what's happening.
What happened before that?
But then they go into that weird like train bunker thing, and there's just like little aliens running around, but then they never find them. Like, it's so creepy.
It's really creepy.
We also just briefly mentioned the best music on television at the time, Mark Snow.
Oh, absolutely.
Like because part and parcel with that scene of the aliens running around is his music, where it's just
where you're like, they're on me. Like it feels like
it feels like it.
And it's the same thing with War of the Copperphages, where it's like you feel like you have bugs on you.
Yeah.
And it was much more common back then to have an actual score with an orchestra, or at least it's a small orchestra, and to just be able to do all of this with a synthesizer, it's pretty genius.
It was a really great mix, because I mean, they definitely released his score on CD, but they also had like multiple volumes of of like needle drops from
Yeah,
this
and they're
show.
kinda, like, inspired by sort of stuff.
Yeah.
There were, yeah, a couple soundtrack albums that came out
That
that
was the
were
first
pretty
time I
good.
heard the Nick Cave and the Bad Seed song Red Right Hand, which is now
Yeah,
ubiquitous with the Scream
with
franchise.
Scream, and I'm always like, predates.
Yeah.
Dwayne Barry predates the
Yeah.
first Scream, so that belongs to them. But I think Clyde Bruckman is my favorite episode of anything ever.
Yeah.
I
It's
think
incredible.
every time I watch it, it's just such a beautiful piece of television. It's funny, it's sad, it's it has such that great central performance of Peter Boyle. Um, there's just something really magical about Darren Morgan is such a cynic in a
Yeah.
lot of ways. And he is in all of his episodes point to some sort of human malaise, misery thing that we will never overcome. But then always in that episode too, it's the reminder that if you feel this way, you are not alone.
Right.
Which exists in Clyde Bruckman. It exists in We're Monster, in the revival. So there's something oddly hopeful about them, even though they're playing with these, just sort of the worst aspects of human life, the misery that we're all sort of trying to get over day to day, not even related to anything necessarily supernatural, but just like the sadness of what it is to be
Yeah.
human and live a life. Yeah.
Yeah. He's like a lot of the, especially like like Jose Chung's from Outer Space, where everybody in that episode is crazy and weird and silly and kind of ridiculous. But the whole thing ends with this very nice monologue by the character Jose Chung, basically saying, you know, in our own little ways, we are all of us alone. And it's like,
Mm.
it's very nice. It's sweet, even though,
Yeah.
everyone's kind of silly. Like, what's his face? The guy who wrote a screenplay based on his alien activity and then went on to found a religion about the lava men or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, but I think that's the hallmark. I wish he can do whatever he wants and did do whatever he wants, but I wish he had written more episodes because he kind of stops after this. Like, he comes back in the revival, but he doesn't really do, and of course he's in Small Potatoes, which is one of the best performances ever. But yeah, let's see, what are some of the other season 3s before we move on? Pusher, we got to talk about Pusher. Pusher's incredible. That's the Vince Gilligan written episode about the guy who can just suggest that people do things and then they have to do it. It's really good.
It's great. I also sort of derided Pusher comes back in a future episode, which I had derided in the past, but then when I rewatched it, I was like, oh, okay, this is a little bit more interesting than I remember it being. But Pusher is just such a fantastic, tense episode. I also, when we were rewatching it over, I guess it was the end of the pandemic, not the end, but the end of everybody being at home.
Yeah, the end of lockdown.
Yeah, there were three of us who were rewatching and one newbie, and the newbie being our friend Sarah. And it was during the first time she said anything like this was during Pusher at the end when they're in the hospital room and Scully takes Mulder's hand and says, let's not let him take any more of her time. And she just very, like, in caps on Twitter was like, they're in love. Which she had not made a peep about that earlier in the season. So I was like, that was the one that got her. It's always fun to see in real time when somebody just like flips the switch.
Yeah.
And that was Pusher for her. But it's such a scary episode. I mean, just like the idea that you could make someone have a heart attack or make someone drive into traffic. It's and then the Russian roulette scene is just so incredibly directed and acted. I mean, the way you can see in Mulder's face that he is both not in control of himself and kind of dead-eyed, but also like pleading for Scully to get out of there. Yeah. It's amazing.
Oh yeah, that is one of the best.
That's a Rob Bowman.
Yep. Robert Wisden was the guest actor who played Robert Patrick Modell, who's this, and it is one of the best. They found some of the best, I would say, actors working in Canada. I was going to say Canadian actors, but he's English. But and gave them these amazing parts. Like nowadays, you would almost assuredly populate every bad guy with a person that like a famous,
fly somebody in to do it. Yeah, and they were casting locally.
and I think it pays off so much more than like the fact that Peter Boyle is in that episode doesn't detract from it at all, but it also is like a rarity at that point
Right.
to have somebody of that kind of stature come
And
in.
a Peter Boyle is not Brad Pitt. You know, I
Totally,
mean, he's not like
absolutely.
he's a character actor. He's a different sort of actor. Um, yeah, it's not like star casting, I don't think.
Yeah, because
And this
even a couple seasons later in
he,
Bad Blood, when they had already moved to LA, like Luke Wilson is in that, and
yeah,
it's for a purpose, and it's a silly character, but like um that's a person, you know, a
yeah,
type of casting you would not have gotten back then.
for sure. Yeah, there's a reason it's Luke
Yeah.
Wilson. There are some oof, man, there's some rough ones. I think maybe the one that I hated the most. Oh, I hate Too Shy. Too Shy is just
Oh,
offensive
it is.
roundly.
It is very, very bad.
Roundly offensive. Because this guy apparently is some sort of alien that like feeds on, or he's not an alien, he's like a demon that like feeds on like human fat. And so he's trying to find larger women online to date and like consume. But the funniest thing about it and the most 90s thing about it is that he's going online to ask at like a chat room where women are like a size 12. And I'm like, that's a size you can, that's a straight size. That's not even a plus size.
Right.
So you would think if this was your main source of food, but like in the 90s they couldn't imagine a woman larger than a size 12.
Well, like I recently rewatched, I think it was for Halloween time, Silence of the Lambs, which is one of the best movies ever
Oh
made,
yeah.
maybe. But he's literally like, "Oh, is she a great big fat person?" It's like,
Yeah,
no, she is not.
she's not.
Like,
She's not.
very clearly not a great big fat person.
And also, when does she show up in the X-Files? Because she's in it.
Brooke Smith?
Yeah.
Is she? I don't remember.
That's so.
Are you thinking of Grey's Anatomy? I'm just kidding. I know.
No.
She was on that, though.
I swear she was. I'll find it. Yeah, that's not a great one.
No.
But there are some other fun ones. Syzygy, you get a young
Oh, yes.
Ryan Reynolds.
Yes, Ryan Reynolds. And also a friend of ours is also in that.
Yes.
Jeremy Raddick is in that. Who's a guy we know.
Who told us the story about he's giving the eulogy in the scene where they go to the funeral of the boy who died, Ryan Reynolds, actually. Yeah. And he was telling us the story on Twitter when we got to that episode. Okay, maybe I was wrong about her being on the X-Files. I think I was wrong. But that he had just they gave him a certain amount of lines and then told him to just kind of wing it because he was just going to be in the background, so it didn't really matter. And that he was just like making stuff up, and he kept going and going and going and thinking like, when are they going to cut me off? Like, are they ever going to cut me off? And just making things up as he went. And then he finally stopped talking, and David Duchovny was like, "We were just trying to see how long you could go." they just wanted to see what he could do. But yeah,
that's so good.
Jeremy's in that. That's kind of great.
Yeah.
That's a weird episode. I really like the episodes where, and this might sound counterintuitive because I am a shipper, very much so, but I love the episodes where Mulder and Scully are mean to each other and are pushing each other's buttons.
Mm-hmm.
Because it just sort of goes to show how well they know each other, and obviously they're not being controlled by themselves in this period of time. But it's just really, really funny watching them push each other's buttons and getting incredibly annoyed at all the things they would be annoyed about on a regular day, but probably wouldn't show.
Yeah,
like Bad Blood. Bad Blood gives you a look at that too, which is it's just a kind of like a full circle picture of the relationship. And it's like if you spend that much time with somebody, there are things that they do that drive you completely insane.
Oh, for sure. And yeah, it just kind of shows also these were very long seasons back then.
Oh yeah.
And so they had to there was more room for that kind of stuff to just become part of the show.
Yeah.
Because it is a procedural, but it's a serialized procedural to a degree. And so yeah, like the fact that the actors had to spend, hundreds of hours a week together or whatever it was, like, just makes a lot of sense that they would start to get like Just make each other angry.
Gilligan? No, they
Yeah.
never did.
Can you believe it?
Can you believe it?
That one also has the two girls who are psychic and like, or whatever. They're born on the same day. It's a kind of a complicated thing, but they always say like, hate him, wouldn't want to date him.
Hate
And
him, wouldn't want to date him. Yeah.
That's how you know they were going to kill somebody. There's the Nisei and 731 are dark episodes.
Yeah. Super dark.
That was the first time I knew about 731, the Japanese I don't even know what you want to call it, but like where they conducted horrible experiments on people. Real thing in real life. But this one is about that, but with aliens involved on a train. Good, real good stuff. And also the Syndicate growing and stuff.
The Syndicate growing. And my favorite scene from that episode is when Moulder is on his cell phone with Scully and she's like, don't jump on that moving train. And not only does he jump onto the moving train, but he has his phone in his hand. He doesn't even put it in his pocket or anything. And then it immediately falls out of his hand.
Yeah,
and
instantly drops it.
And you're like, you idiot. We had when we did our panels for the blog, we would kind of be like, favorite mythology episode, favorite monster of the week, a bunch of categories that we would fill out each week and each season. And one of our categories was like, Moulder, you're lucky you're cute, because there's always something like totally indefensible he does in every season where you're like, all right, you're lucky you're cute.
I can't remember if you all did this on Head Over Reveals or if we just had spoken about it, but like the wild leaps that Moulder would make that are often correct, and you're just like, how did you get to that? Like, but why? But you're right. But like, how did you find this out?
Or the way he'll like answer questions. I cannot remember what episode this is, but I remember the dialogue. He's on a payphone. He's at an airport, and Scully's like, "Where are you going?" And he says, "Off to water the seeds of doubt. Bye-bye," and hangs up the phone. Like, how could you be friends with that person? He'll just leave.
Yeah.
In Jersey Devil, he just like leaves her in another town. Like she drives him to this town.
Right.
And then he just like leaves her. Ay.
You're lucky you're cute.
We love him though. You're lucky you're cute. Yeah, season 3's got some good ones and it's got some rough ones. There's like a high quotient of like kind of offensive episodes.
Yeah,
with Tesa dos Vijos and
that's just not a good episode. That's about
Hell
evil.
Money.
Hell Money is not a good episode, and it also has no sci-fi or horror elements in it at all. It is literally
really
just about
doesn't.
medical, like stealing of people's organs.
A young Lucy Liu though.
And a young B.D. Wong.
And a young B.D. Wong.
And an old James Hong, but not as old as he is currently.
Yeah. Less old James Hong.
He's been old since forever. I think he's like almost 100 years old. He's getting there.
Good for him.
He's 94. No, 90. I can't do math. 96, I think he's about to turn.
Nice.
But anyway. Yeah, what else? I don't know. We're almost. This is the bad part of this. This is a very long show. We might have to do a 2-parter with this.
Listen, I would love to do a part 2.
All right. Well, let's at least talk about season 4, and then we'll have you come back and we'll talk about the middle. You know what? We might even do part 3. I don't know. We'll do it.
It's a long show. There's like 218 episodes of the show and 2 movies.
Yeah. Well, there's one movie and one. They should have done another draft. But
yeah, I was gonna say we don't really have to talk about I Want to Believe, but
no. My wife was so mad. I didn't make her watch the revival, but I was like, well, they did make a movie. Like we could watch that, and she was just like, "This is not a movie," and I'm like,
no,
"I know it's not.
It's not a movie. It's not an episode. We'll get to it. Season 4 is iconic. Season 4
really
like
is.
no
I think it might be
skips.
Pound for pound the best.
Yeah.
Second episode of being home. Well, first of all, I really like the finale of season 3 into the premiere of season 4, which is Talitha Kumi and Heron Volk, and that is just mythology through and through. But it brings together the clone, the alien bounty hunter, and the black oil stuff, which is just barely started at this point.
Yeah,
only just a little bit before.
The bees. The
Yes.
smallpox vaccination.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff.
And oh gosh, when Mulder goes to that farm where all the tiny clones of his sister are working, it's just like,
So
what is this
dark.
place? Like it's wild. But home is the kind of standout because it is so dark and it is clearly a Texas Chainsaw Massacre riff.
Right.
Um oof.
Well, what could
And
you
it's
even
really
say?
violent, like incredibly violent. Because the family's house is all full of traps and whatnot, and people get hella murdered in it.
And there's a woman who's kept chained up under the bed so that they can impregnate her, and that woman
Mm-hmm.
is their mother. And also, there's so many kind
But
of
she's like kind of okay with it. It's
she's
weird.
kind of okay with it. There are also a surprising amount of like off-color jokes in this episode where you think that's not appropriate for what
Yeah.
we're dealing with, but that's a very X-Files thing to me too.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of Mayberry references.
Oh yes.
Some really good makeup jobs though.
Oh yeah.
But yeah.
They're really, really good. Taliko is not a very good episode, but it does have another thing that I quote to myself a lot, which is deceive, inveigle, and obfuscate.
That's a great line.
Um
Oh yes, is the photo. Oh right. Okay, I remember that one. Unruly is terrific, I think.
yes.
That's another really great monster of the week, and that is probably the first great Vince Gilligan episode.
Yeah, I think so. I'm trying to think if there's anything.
This is the psychic photography.
Pusher's the
Pusher.
first
Yeah,
great one,
Pusher.
but yeah,
Duh,
the
yeah,
second
sorry.
by easily. This is at the point where like God, every Vince Gilligan episode is great. Like it's just all of a sudden great. Like he's such a good writer.
If he had been a part of the revival, I mean, if he had showrun the revival, I think we would be living in a completely different world. But that was never going to happen.
That's
my dream, though. I love The Field Where I Died. Some people were very down on that episode when it aired, and I think they thought that it was, there were, as I mentioned, the MSRs and the No Romos. There was such an ongoing debate about that, and I think people thought that episode was the show coming down on one side of that. Because it's about past lives and Mulder basically finding out that his like soulmate is this woman who they're on the case with in his past life, and it's not Scully, but she was like another person in his life. And so people were like mad about that, but it's like a very beautiful episode.
Yeah.
Another Rob Bowman, and it's about cults, which I love.
This was I think the last season where they filmed in Canada, but they had a much bigger budget. And so every episode looked incredible. Like they were able to, and especially like this one, they're out in fields and they're able to like shoot with interesting lighting and everything like that.
Yeah. The lighting in that, they use a lot of golden hour in that episode.
Yeah.
It's really lovely.
And
a sad central story.
Mm-hmm. And the main actress in it, Kristen Cloak, is married to Glenn Morgan in real life.
Oh,
which is why she's been in everything.
Yeah,
when they made the Black Christmas remake in the early 2000s, she's in it, but she plays a college student, and it's like, come on.
Oh, that's funny. I remember seeing that, but I don't remember very much about it.
It's not very good. That's probably why. Yeah, I really like that episode as well. Sanguinarium, I can almost never remember this one.
That's like where witches have taken over like a plastic surgery office.
Oh my gosh. Yep. A doctor is shocked to discover he has mutilated the face of a patient with acid.
It's really disgusting, especially the liposuction scene.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Wouldn't recommend. But it also has, I think, my favorite Mulder joke, which is like they're going to see the nurse, one of the nurses that used to work at this hospital, and they knock on the door and nobody answers. But he looks at the side of the house and there's a broom propped up against the house, and he points at it and says, "Probable cause," because he thinks it was witches. Really very funny to me.
I think one of the first episodes, I would have to go back and look. One of the few episodes, I will say, written by women at this point in the show.
Yes,
I
very
did
few.
not make a count, but was definitely not a thing that happened all that frequently on the show,
No,
but
no. I want to say like 5 or 6.
yeah. But then you got Musings of a Cigarette Smoking Man, which is where you get his possible past. There's like still sort of he is watching and listening to his own story being delivered, and so you can kind of assume it's probably true, but also might not be true, which I think is a really fun thing about it. But you find out that he, of course, is the one who killed Kennedy and set up
Right.
Lee Harvey Oswald, and also wants to be a writer of like
Yeah, like if
fiction.
someone had bought one of his novels, none of this ever would have happened.
Yeah.
He's
Because we
just
know
a
at this
thwarted
point
writer.
that he and Mulder's dad were like, thick as thieves in the early days of the syndicate, but then you also find out that Cigarette Smoking Man was always like basically a bad guy. He was just
Yeah,
he was the
He's
Krychek of his
always
day.
an operator, right?
Yeah. But I love this when he's in power, there's the joke because it's supposed to be like the earlier 90s, and he's like, the Bills will never win a Super Bowl while
Oh,
I'm in
yeah.
charge, and it has proved to be true.
It's proved to be true. That's funny. I forgot about that. I also really like Tunguska and Terma are a
Yeah.
really good two-parter, that kind of like fall sweeps two-parter that they would do. This
yeah.
one's really great. This is when Mulder ends up in a Russian gulag. Don't ask me how that happens. I can't remember how that happens. But
With
Krychek is
Krychek, I
also
think,
there.
or because of
Yes,
Krychek, one of those.
because of Krychek. Scully has to go and testify in front of a Senate committee about his whereabouts, and she refuses to, so she gets sent to jail, which is amazing. She's like held in contempt. This is a really great two-parter. Some pretty epic stuff happens in this one.
Yeah. Is this the one? Oh, I can't remember. Is this the one where, spoilers, Krychek loses his arm?
Yes, it is.
Okay, it is.
Yeah. And there's
And
that
then he's
great scene at the end where he just like has a like plastic arm and just like dipping tea, a tea bag. Yeah.
First of all, I don't buy that Krychek drinks tea. That man is coffee all the way.
But they reveal that like he could speak fluent Russian the whole time.
Yeah.
Who's this guy? Love him.
Another Vince Gilligan, Paper Hearts, I think is a really good one, although it does kind of spit in the face with a lot of the stuff that we know about Mulder and his like history. At this time, they're trying to really play with like what actually happened to his sister. And even once they reveal 100%, like much, a couple seasons from now, like what exactly happened with Mulder's sister? She didn't actually get abducted by aliens and all this stuff. I'm like, I don't really buy that. I don't think it's fun. So I don't really
it's
go
not
with it.
fun. It's not fun. I think having an episode where he really has to face because he has just believed for so long that she was taken, that there's an episode where he has to face that something really terrestrial and horrible might have happened to her.
Yeah.
It's a really good like a character study for him. And also Tom Noonan is great in this. I think that they wrote this for him.
Yeah.
He's terrifying and so like just nonchalant and yeah.
This is his like this is to Mulder. This episode is to Mulder what Beyond the Sea is to Scully. Where
absolutely.
It's just a lot of this great kind of sinister guest actor in one of your main cast, and it works incredibly. But they're so different. Like there's just different types of characters too, which I think is like because Tom Noonan's so kind of like. He plays basketball, like he's just kind of like, yeah, whatever. And, oh yeah, I found this one or whatever. And then you get Brad Dourif a couple seasons earlier being like, oh
yeah. He's like possessed by oh gosh, so good.
El Mundo Gira is the one about El Chupacabra, a thing I didn't know about at the time. It's not a very good episode, but
it's not a very good episode. It's kind of fun, and it has Tuco from Breaking Bad, a young Tuco. So that's fun.
Oh my gosh, you're right. It does. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he looks so different.
He does.
But when you look at it into his eyes, you can tell that it's him. He's very young in this.
Leonard Betts. Come on.
Post Super Bowl.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, this is the post Super Bowl episode.
This was the height of X-Files fandom. Was like you said, like 4, 5, 6 movie. Yeah, because this was the post Super Bowl episode of television that year, and I think they moved some episodes around because I think actually Never Again was supposed to air before Leonard Betts, but it makes so much more sense to air after it.
Yes.
as far as where like Scully's head is at, because of the reveal at the end of Leonard Betts, which I will never forget watching live. Also, this man, what's that actor's name? Paul McCrane has been decapitated on screen multiple times. That is actually in different projects. If you recall him, getting his head chopped off by a helicopter in ER.
That is an instance I will never forget, first of all, but like a few episodes before that, like he had bad stuff happen to, like that whole season was just like leading up to him just getting his head chopped off by this helicopter. But like, he wasn't in a good place before.
No, he wasn't doing great.
He'd lost limbs, I think, really else in like a car crash or something.
Well, he can grow his limbs back in Leonard Betts, so that's a good thing.
The man who eats cancer.
Yeah. It's so smart. It's so smart and it's so creepy. And yeah, of course, it's just for that big reveal at the end. But what a way to pull in new fans. If
my gosh!
The first episode that you saw, you'd be like, "Oh my god, I didn't have to know what happens next."
They were. I mean, this would be insane for today's. They were routinely getting like 15 million viewers an episode, which is like incredibly good. But that one got 29 million, which is I think insane. The highest they ever got, maybe.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But yeah, that was like everybody watched that. Like, I want to say this was the. Was this the Super Bowl where the Broncos won? I think it was.
I think it was. I'm a Broncos actually. Fan.
So we were like, yeah. And then I'm like, all right, everybody leave. I gotta watch the Super Bowl. But yeah, Never Again is a really fun episode because it's about a talking tattoo voiced by Jodie Foster.
Yeah.
Which is not anything you ever thought you wanted, but there you go.
No. And like you said, they're really not many episodes that are written by women, and this one is not either. It's written by Glenn Morgan and James Wong, but I think as far as a Scully character study, it's actually superbly well done, and just kind of her disaffectedness and kind of getting disillusioned with the way that Moulder treats her, and that she just like feels unseen and unappreciated. Because that is the way that he is. I mean, he's not the best person at communicating that kind of stuff anyway. But just that she would kind of snap, especially after getting a diagnosis, and decide to do something completely out of character, but not really, because you really get the sense that that is her, and that she's just like formed herself into this rule-abiding person that she is. But it's a lot of fun, and Gilligan is great in it, and it has the classic ending where they're talking, and he's so upset that she kind of like ran off without him, and he didn't know where she was, and she says, "It's my life, Moulder," and he says, "But it's my," and then he stops talking, and that's the end of the episode.
Yeah.
Which was discussed at length, on every message board ever. But it doesn't end with them kind of like making up about it, which is something else I really like about that episode. Like, they're pissed at each other, and that's where they leave it.
They do.
Yeah.
Also, like, it's worth pointing out that like Scully was still in her late 20s at this time. You know what I mean? Like, she had been she
should have been at the club.
Yeah, like, and at this point we'd already had at least 4 or 5, maybe even episodes of Moulder like hitting on a woman and stuff like that, and kind of having relationships and whatever. And then like he gets mad that she's like, I mean, granted, this man is possessed by a tattoo, but still. We don't need to. That's beside the point.
It's still none of your business, Moulder, actually. And also put her name on the door and give her a desk, for God's sakes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. She doesn't have a desk. That's terrible.
No desk. Yeah. She just like sits at his desk. Memento Mori is lovely. I love Memento Mori. It's a really great mythology episode, and it's a really great emotional episode.
You basically have this Scully like unofficial 3-parter, because you have Leonard Betts followed by Never Again, followed by Memento Mori, which is all about Scully kind of finally dealing with the fact that she has this. She does in fact have this tumor, which of course is, we find out based on the fact that she was abducted and all this stuff. And I love it anytime the families of the characters come in. Scully's mom is one of my favorite like side characters. She's very, very good.
Larkin. A gift. She's so wonderful. We love Margaret. It's also so Scully for her to be like, not call her mom and tell her that she has cancer because she didn't want to worry her.
Right.
Like, she just does not ask for help. And I think that's what's so heartbreaking about it when she meets all of the women in this group who are all dealing with the same thing. And suddenly she feels like, she has a kind of support system that she doesn't have to explain everything to. And then like one by one, they all get taken from her. It's brutal.
And they also like know her like instinctively, which is a
Right.
really interesting kind of thing that Scully is immediately like put off by.
Yeah.
But it is welcoming, at the same time. But she, they recognize that's the one where she goes to the door and they're like, oh yeah, hi, come in. Like,
hi, you also have a thing. In
yeah,
the
we can
back of your
tell.
neck. Yeah.
I did really like, I think it's pronounced Kaddish or Kaddish.
Kaddish, I think.
I remember really liking that one because that's the one about the golem.
Yes.
Which is
That's
about a culture that I knew nothing about at the time, and I thought that was really, really interesting.
I learned what Navajo code talkers were, not
hell
from
yeah.
school,
Yeah.
but from the X-Files.
Yeah.
I learned a lot of stuff that they did on TV at school.
Unrequited is one I don't really remember. Was this
Unrequited?
Darn it all.
Oh, this one's not very good.
No.
Yeah, Vietnam War veteran. Oh yeah, is that the one where the person drowns in the pool, but you can't see who's drowning them?
Yeah.
Like this guy can. Yeah,
it is. Yeah,
that one.
He's somehow an invisible assassin. Whatever.
Yes. Yeah. Tempest, Fugit, and Max, I don't love.
I don't love them either. I think I should like them, and I don't.
Yeah, I don't. I'm trying to remember what it is that I don't like about them. I just think they're kind of meandering.
Yeah.
And the mythology that you get before that, I mean, we didn't even talk about like, we'll get there. Never mind. But there had just been such great mythology leading up to that. And yeah, it just feels like it doesn't really go anywhere. And it doesn't really, Max Fennig comes back and it's more about his story and what happens to him, but nothing really has a effect on the broader plot that I can remember.
No, not really. Like, yeah, it doesn't, except we get like a really long sequence of showing you what his abduction looked like, which I thought was kind of well done.
It's
and
cool.
everything.
Yeah. But it's well done. And that is like he is a very empathetic character. So
for sure. Yeah.
Like I like Max Fennig, but yeah, I don't know. It's maybe if it had been one episode instead of two, but it's a little bit meandering.
So let's skip over Synchrony. It's not really all that important. But Small Potatoes is a very fun
scary
episode.
Tree, the Killer Trees, though, right? Yeah.
Synchrony, yeah, I think that's
Killer Trees. Yeah. Small Potatoes. Small Potatoes. I still have to watch it through my fingers. It is still one of the most secondhand embarrassing things I've ever seen in my life. That last scene. It's like it's impossible. I've only ever watched it like that.
Yeah.
But David Duchovny is especially great in this episode, playing essentially himself, and then Eddie Van Blunt in Moulder's body, trying to like get. And he does this a couple other times in the show, with Morris Fletcher and all that. But it's so subtle.
Yeah.
Initially, it's just the way he carries himself and his posture and the way he walks that you're like, that's not that good. And it's genius. And again, he is playing a character played by the writer who thinks that Moulder is like the biggest jerk on television. So there's just a great loop of kind of taking the piss out of each other.
Yeah. Well, and then
in this episode,
you actually get, Eddie Van Blunt, as played by Darren Morgan, saying to Moulder, I was born a loser. You're one by choice. Yes. It's like...
yeah. And you're like, he really means that.
Yeah.
He absolutely means that. Really, yeah, that's a funny episode. It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
It's a lot of the scaffolding of the plot is unfortunate, and there's a lot of issues that happen in the future as far as womanhood and pregnancy and yeah, I don't even know. But if you kind of forget that all
yeah. If you're
It's a
just watching
very
it
fun
and
episode.
watching David Duchovny play this dork playing
Yeah.
him is really fun, where he goes,
And realizing
FBI.
and they're like, "You spelled Federal Bureau of Investigation wrong. It was a typo twice." It's just that you would see a guy who looks like, again, it's just funny, the idea that you would see a guy who looks like David Duchovny on the street and be like, wow, his life must be amazing. And then he lives in this like hovel and doesn't have any friends and is addicted to porn, which is still, I'm like, that is such a funny characteristic to give to like a
Yeah.
main character on a network television show that aired at 8 p.m. that no one would ever do now. But it does, it tells you so much about him.
Yeah. And you
And
like, the Morris Fletcher stuff also does the same thing, but like,
yeah,
where you find out in those 2 episodes that Mulder doesn't even, he has a bedroom, he just doesn't go in
he
it.
doesn't
Like,
start it. Oh
he just sleeps on the
god.
couch
He just
on
sleeps
purpose.
on
He
the
just likes to
couch
sleep on the couch. Like, what a
because he's
weirdo.
a weirdo. Yeah, and then he gets
Yeah.
the waterbed, which is a lot of fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
Small Potatoes is great.
Yeah. It's, and I'm trying to remember, like, Zero Sum and then Demons and Gethsemane are all, Gethsemane is a very good beginning of a 3-parter, but they're all mythology episodes, and I kind of can't remember one from the other. Like, this is all around the time when the mythology was very similar, I guess.
Zero Sum is a Skinner episode because we
The
didn't talk about Avatar from season 3.
Yes. There you go.
Which is another thing that later when I saw Don't Look Now for the first time, I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's what Avatar is. But the Skinner Spotlight episodes are kind of fun because they're always like, I don't know, him being faced with some aspect of like deciding whether or not he's like an inherently evil person.
Right. He did some stuff in Vietnam he's not proud of, and he's just
he
like,
did some stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, and then Elegy is the women who see like a harbinger of their own death.
Oh yeah, which
and
is a
Scully
really creepy
sees
idea.
it. Yeah, very creepy. They're seeing other people see them like right before they die. That's the one where they go bowling. They don't go bowling. He bowls actually, but the person gets killed by the bowling apparatus.
Oh yeah.
And that becomes, but it's significant because it is suggesting that Scully is getting closer and closer to death.
Right. It has Sidney Lassick playing Chuck Forsh, which is one of my favorite things, where he goes FORSH or SCH, Chuck Forsh. It's just one of my favorite. I'm just a human being. He says that a bunch of times too. He was in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. That's why.
Oh yeah, classic. How many times have I said?
I was going to ask you if you've seen a movie, but me asking you if you've seen a particular movie, if you haven't seen it, will give away why I'm asking it. So I'm not going to do it.
Damn it. Okay. Maybe I'll mention it and then we'll figure it out. Yeah, Demons is Moulder Amnesia.
Yes. Well, this is the first time you get no, it's not the first time. It's the second time, obviously, where you get Chris Owens, who would later go on to play Spender as young cigarette smoking man, who, spoilers, is the son of Cigarette Smoking Man, the character.
Yeah. But who isn't at this point?
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
Who isn't? There's some kind of like just Mulder like destroying his brain and his body because he wants to find something out. There are so many episodes like that where he just goes and does something completely out of pocket.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you could have killed yourself. And you're like, I don't know. Somebody said if you drilled a hole in my brain that I would remember where my sister went. I'm like, so you did it? Out of his mind. And then Gethsemane is, when we were watching rewatching this, and I can't remember if it was probably when we got to Requiem. Like there's a lot of Jesus metaphors, but they start to get confused where you're like, who is Jesus?
Yeah.
Is it future baby? Or is it Mulder? Or is it everybody who? And Gethsemane obviously is where we start to pull some of that in. For as not Catholic as he is, he has sort of a like dark night of the soul, take this cup away from me kind of thing happen, which is again like a really great cliffhanger going into a summer hiatus.
Yeah, and I'm trying to, all of these kind of run together, but not in a bad way. But I'm just like, I watched them so fast when the other time I watched it. What's the one? I think it's, oh boy, let me start again. New sentence. Okay. This is the, they go up the mountain one.
Ascension?
Uh, uh,
Not the mountain that she gets abducted
no,
from.
no. Sorry, but they
um,
shoot up.
Red and the Black, Patient X and the Red and the
Yes,
Black.
that's the one I was getting. That's later on.
Yeah, that's
A
later.
lot of mountain stuff, but this
Lot
one
of
does
mountain stuff.
introduce Michael Critchkow, who is a character
It
who I wish
does.
was cooler. I wish he was in
I
more
know.
episodes because
He
I
has
really
a
like
great
that character.
name.
And
It's a good
then
name.
Section Chief Blevins, real, which that's
Yeah.
for next season.
That's
We'll
for
talk
next,
about that one
yeah.
next season.
But,
yeah, we
great
talked for
finale.
90 minutes on 4 seasons, so I think we're good. Please come back and talk about the rest.
Anytime.
All right.
Anytime. I would love to. This has been so great. As I said, my favorite thing to talk about.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite things to talk about with you, Kyle. So.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on the show. Sage, how can people find you and your work on the internet should they choose to do so?
Should they choose to do so? Headoverfields.com is our website, and there's a lot of X-Files content on there if you want to super deep dive into any of these seasons, to the point where we're writing this thinking no one's going to read this but us, but maybe somebody wants to deep dive into it. And I am Sage Youngest on Blue Sky. I'm marginally on Twitter, but I think I went private. Not that matters to anybody or to any of our data, but you can find me there on Blue Sky. And yeah,
I happen to know you're on Letterboxd. Do you want me to plug your Letterboxd too?
Oh yeah, plug my Letterboxd, sure.
All right. Now I gotta find. I'm pretty sure
I don't remember what I am. I think I'm just Sage Youngest on there. Let me see. I always forget. Where is it?
Oh my gosh.
Sorry, I don't know where I am.
No, it's okay. I don't know how to find anything on Letterboxd.
I don't know where my Letterboxd is. Diary list. No.
Oh, you watched The Monkey and hated it.
I hated it. I'm Sage_Young at Letterboxd. Yeah.
Which is very fitting because I am Kyle_Anderson on Letterboxd, and I do not do anything. I am not even on Blue Sky really anymore. I do miss the days because when you all were watching the X-Files, it was very fun to follow along because y'all were live tweeting it, and that was really enjoyable to catch up on or kind of follow along in real time. Those were super fun.
I'm so glad anyone else enjoyed that but us, because I just felt like we were just blocking people's feeds, but I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Of course. Well, I partook in one or two evenings of it, but it takes a lot out of you.
It really does.
The fact that you did that every week or whatever was
we would do 4 episodes every Friday, and that was how we got through it. It was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. So I'm sure that's in the archives somewhere in the Library of Congress, but definitely go to Head Over Fields. All right.
Please.
Well, thank you all for listening. Thank you again, Sage, for joining me.
Thank you.
I've been Kyle Anderson. Join me again next time on Laser Focus when my guest will be a different person. Bye-bye. Laser Focus is a production of Nerdist Industries and Legendary Digital Networks. It was produced, edited, and hosted by me, Kyle Anderson. For more, visit Nerdist.com.